I'm Alberta, 68 years old, and my family has farmed this Montana soil for 3 generations. My son Jackson and his wife Eliza have been pressuring me to sell our 300 acres to fund their tech startup. When I refused, Jackson told me I was too old to understand modern dreams. Then Eliza called, suggesting a peace offering dinner. I arrived hoping to mend our relationship, but instead found a bank manager and real estate broker with contracts ready. They wanted my signature, my land, my legacy. I smiled and said, "Before I tell you how I discovered what was really happening behind my back, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that like button if you believe family land should stay in the family." The first time I truly understood what our farm meant was when I was 7 years old. My grandfather took my small hand in his weathered one and scooped up a handful of dark soil. "This dirt has stories to tell, Bertie," he said, using my childhood nickname. "Your great-grandparents crossed half the country to find this land. Every callus on their hands, every drop of their sweat is mixed in this soil." That memory stayed with me as I grew up watching my father and grandfather work from sunrise to sunset. Their dedication wasn't just about making a living, but about honoring a promise to care for something precious that would outlast all of us. Our 300 acres in western Montana has remained in the Harding family since 1924. What started as a struggling homestead during the Depression gradually transformed into a thriving operation through decades of careful stewardship and bone-breaking work. I learned to drive a tractor before I could ride a bicycle. By 12, I could help birth a calf mend fencing and identify dozens of plant species growing on our land. My father made sure I understood every aspect of farm management, never treating me differently because I was a girl. "Land doesn't care about the gender of who tends it," he'd say. "It only responds to respect and hard work." When I was 22, Robert Miller came to our farm looking for seasonal work. A local boy from 2 counties over, he had an agricultural degree and dreams of innovative farming. I fell in love with his gentle hands and forward-thinking mind. Within a year, we were married in the meadow by the creek that cuts through the eastern section of our property. For 43 years, Robert and I worked side by side, weathering everything Mother Nature and the economy threw at us. We survived the farm crisis of the 1980s, when interest rates soared and crop prices plummeted. We adapted through the severe drought of 1992 that turned neighboring farms to dust. When commodity prices crashed in 2008, we pivoted to organic methods and found new markets. Through it all, Robert remained my steady partner, his quiet determination matching my more outspoken approach. Between your fire and my patience, he'd joke, "This land doesn't stand a chance against us." 5 years ago, Robert complained of heartburn after dinner. By midnight, he was gone, a massive heart attack, taking him before the ambulance could even reach our rural property. The paramedics were kind but helpless as they found me cradling his body on our porch swing, where we'd spent thousands of evenings watching the sunset over our fields. The grief was consuming, but the farm waited for no one. The very next morning, there were animals to feed crops needing attention. The rhythm of the land pulled me forward when nothing else could. Our farm isn't the biggest in the county, but it has special qualities that make it uniquely valuable. The creek provides natural irrigation and supports diverse wildlife. Our century-old barn, built by my grandfather with timber from the property, has become something of a local landmark. Most importantly, decades of organic management have created soil health that new farmers can only dream about. 3 years ago, I learned just how valuable our land had become when a neighboring property sold for triple what it would have fetched a decade earlier. Urban expansion from Bozeman was gradually reaching our area, and our water rights alone were worth a small fortune in increasingly drought-prone Montana. Despite sitting on increasingly valuable land, I've maintained a modest lifestyle. The farmhouse has been updated over the years, but remains essentially the same structure my grandparents built. I drive a 10-year-old pickup truck that Robert and I purchased together. My splurges are practical things, like the solar panels we installed to reduce electricity costs and the high-speed internet connection that helps me manage farm business. What some might see as just land is to me a living legacy. Every fence post tells a story. The old oak by the north field was planted when my father was born. The slight rise behind the barn holds the ashes of both my parents scattered where they could forever overlook the land they loved. My adaptation to changing agricultural realities has kept the farm profitable, if not extravagant. We supply organic produce to several high-end restaurants in Bozeman and Missoula. Our Heritage Grain Program partners with artisanal bakeries. The small lavender field I planted after Robert died has become a surprise success with value-added products sold at farmers markets across 3 counties. But the true value of this land can't be calculated on a balance sheet. It's measured in generations of stewardship, in the knowledge passed down, in the promise to those who came before and those who will come after. My grandparents and parents entrusted this land to me, and I've always intended to pass it on, keeping the chain unbroken. What I never anticipated was that the greatest threat to this legacy wouldn't come from economic hardship or natural disaster, but from within my own family. Jackson was our only child, born after years of trying. From the beginning, he was different from the typical farm kid. While I could sit for hours watching tadpoles in the creek or examining the structure of a beehive, Jackson was drawn to mechanics and later electronics. He's got a mind that sees systems, Robert would say proudly. That's valuable on a farm, too. We tried to nurture his unique interests while still teaching him farm skills. By his teenage years, though, Jackson's disinterest in agricultural life became impossible to ignore. He'd find any excuse to avoid chores, disappearing into his room with computer parts and programming books. The land isn't speaking to him the way it spoke to us, I told Robert during one of our porch conversations. We can't force that connection. With our blessing and financial support, Jackson attended college in California, studying computer science. During his sophomore year, he met Eliza Carter, a marketing major from San Francisco, whose family had made their fortune in real estate development. The first time Jackson brought Eliza home to the farm, her discomfort was palpable. She wore impractical shoes that sank into the soft earth and wrinkled her nose at the natural smells of a working farm. Still, I tried to welcome her, appreciating how her confidence and ambition complemented my son's more introverted nature. After graduation, Jackson and Eliza both secured positions with technology companies in Silicon Valley. They married in a lavish ceremony at a Napa Valley vineyard with Eliza's parents covering most of the considerable expense. Robert and I felt out of place among the wealthy tech executives and real estate moguls who comprised most of the guest list. For several years, we saw Jackson and Eliza only during brief holiday visits. They seemed successful by conventional standards, with growing salaries and an apartment in an exclusive San Francisco neighborhood. Jackson rarely asked about the farm, and when he did, his questions focused on its financial performance rather than its well-being. 3 years after Robert's death, Jackson called with unexpected news. He and Eliza were moving back to Montana to launch a startup company focused on agricultural technology. "We're developing sensors and software that can revolutionize how farms operate," he explained enthusiastically. "Imagine knowing exactly when and where to water, precise soil composition, data, automated yield predictions." I was cautiously optimistic. Though I'd embraced some modern farming methods, I knew there was room for technological improvement. More importantly, I hoped this venture might reconnect Jackson with his agricultural roots. When they arrived in Montana, Jackson and Eliza rented an expensive apartment in Bozeman rather than staying in the farmhouse's spacious guest rooms. Still, they visited frequently, with Jackson showing genuine interest in the farm operations for the first time in years. "We'd like to use a small section of the farm to test our prototypes," Jackson proposed during one visit. "Maybe 5 acres on the eastern border." "Of course," I agreed readily. That section by the road would work well, and it's visible to potential investors driving by. For a few months, things progressed amicably. Jackson installed weather stations and soil sensors, collecting data and refining his software. Eliza worked on marketing materials, taking carefully staged photos of Jackson, looking thoughtfully across the fields, tablet in hand. The shift happened gradually. What began as requests to use a small portion of the farm evolved into suggestions about the entire property's potential. "Mom, have you considered how underutilized this land is?" Jackson asked during a Sunday dinner. "With modern methods, you could triple your output on half the acreage." "The farm isn't just about maximum yield," I explained. "It's about sustainable balance. Some areas need to rest, others provide habitat for beneficial insects and wildlife." Eliza would exchange glances with Jackson during these conversations, her expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. "Alberta," she said, using my full name as she always did, "farming is changing. Those who don't adapt get left behind." "I've been adapting for 50 years, I reminded her. "That's how we're still here when many neighboring farms have been sold and subdivided." As their startup burned through initial investor funding without developing a marketable product, their suggestions became more pointed. One evening, they arrived with a professional-looking presentation. "We've run the numbers," Jackson said, opening his laptop at my kitchen table. "If you sold the farm, you could purchase a comfortable condo in Bozeman, invest the remainder, and live off the interest. You'd never have to work again. And we could use a portion of the capital to fully fund our company," Eliza added. "It's a win-win situation." I closed the laptop before they could show their first slide. "This farm isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." "Mom, be reasonable," Jackson argued. "You're 68. How much longer can you manage 300 acres alone?" "I'm not alone," I countered. "I have seasonal help, community support, and decades of knowledge. This land stays in the family." "Then sign it over to me," Jackson suggested, his tone casual, as if asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "I am family, after all. To be developed or sold as soon as I'm gone, no. This farm will transfer to the next generation when the time is right and with proper protections in place." These discussions became increasingly heated over the following months. Jackson would talk about unlocking the capital in the land, while Eliza made subtle comments about me being behind the times or stuck in the past. The breaking point came during a harvest dinner I'd prepared to celebrate the farm's successful season. I'd spent hours cooking Robert's favorite recipes, hoping to reconnect with Jackson through these family traditions. Instead, Jackson arrived in a foul mood, barely touching the food. When I asked what was troubling him, the dam broke. "We lost our primary investor today," he snapped. "Our runway is down to 3 months unless we secure additional funding." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "Perhaps you need to scale back or pivot your concept." "Or," Eliza interjected, "we could have adequate capitalization if you weren't being so stubborn about this outdated farm." "This outdated farm has supported our family for nearly a century," I replied, my own patience wearing thin. "And now, it could support us into the future. If you just let go," Jackson shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You're too old to understand what we're trying to build, Mom. Too stuck in the past to see that your way of life is dying." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson had never spoken to me that way, not even during his rebellious teenage years. "I think you both should leave," I said quietly. "Gladly," Eliza responded, grabbing her designer handbag. "Come on, Jackson. We're wasting our time here." As they headed for the door, Jackson turned back momentarily, perhaps to apologize. But Eliza tugged his arm, and whatever moment of remorse he might have had passed. They drove away, leaving me alone with cooling food and a broken heart. 2 weeks passed without a word from them. I threw myself into farm work, finding solace in physical labor and the steady rhythms of the land. Then, unexpectedly, Eliza called. "Alberta," she began, her voice uncharacteristically warm. "Jackson and I feel terrible about how we left things. We'd like to take you to dinner, a peace offering. No business talk, just family reconnecting." Despite my misgivings, hope fluttered in my heart. Perhaps they'd reconsidered their approach or found other investors. Maybe we could rebuild our relationship without the farm hanging between us. "That sounds lovely," I replied. "Where should we meet?" "The Copper Fox in Bozeman." "Friday at 6, she suggested. "It's quiet, perfect for a family conversation." I agreed, not knowing I was walking into a carefully laid trap. Friday evening arrived with a spring thunderstorm rolling across the valley. I spent extra time getting ready, selecting a blue dress Robert had always loved, and the silver earrings Jackson had given me for my 60th birthday. In my purse, I tucked old family photos and printouts, showing the farm's impressive organic certification achievements, hoping to remind Jackson of what we'd built. The Copper Fox was one of Bozeman's upscale restaurants, with subdued lighting and prices that made me wince. As the hostess led me toward the back, I spotted Jackson and Eliza at a corner table, already seated with 2 people I didn't recognize: a middle-aged man in a navy suit and a woman with a sleek bob and statement jewelry. My steps faltered as warning bells rang in my mind, but I continued forward, reminding myself that Jackson was still my son, regardless of our disagreements. "Mom, you remember Alan Davis from Mountain West Bank?" Jackson said immediately, though I had never met the man. "And this is Cynthia Wells. She specializes in high-value rural properties. No hugs, no warm greetings, no apologies for our previous argument. Just business introductions." "I thought this was a family dinner," I said, remaining standing while the others were seated. "It is," Eliza smiled thinly. "We're discussing the future of our family, which includes financial planning." Reluctantly, I sat down, noticing the documents already spread across the table, loan applications, with Mountain West Bank letterhead property assessments, with my farm's address, and what appeared to be pre-filled sales contracts. "Mrs. Miller," the banker began smoothly, "your son has shared your interest in liquidating your agricultural assets to fund his promising technology venture. We've prepared several financing options that would be beneficial to all parties." I looked at Jackson, whose eyes couldn't quite meet mine. "My son is mistaken," I stated firmly. "I have no interest in selling my farm." "Alberta," Eliza interjected, "at least hear the offer before dismissing it. The numbers might surprise you." The real estate broker slid a paper toward me. "Your property has been professionally assessed at $4.2 million. We have a motivated buyer willing to go to $4.5 million with a fast closing. $4.5 million. The figure momentarily took my breath away, not because I was tempted, but because it demonstrated how little they understood what the farm meant to me. No amount of money could replace the generations of memories, the connection to the land, the promise I'd made to those who came before me. "We've already scheduled preliminary viewings for next week," Cynthia continued, misinterpreting my silence as consideration. "The buyer is particularly interested in the water rights and the creek frontage." "You've scheduled viewings of my property without my permission?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Just preliminary interest checks." She backpedaled slightly. "Nothing official without your signature, of course." "Mrs. Miller," the banker leaned forward, "with the proceeds from the sale, you could purchase a comfortable condo in our new Mountain View development. The remaining funds, properly invested, would generate significant income while still providing substantial capital for your son's business venture." Jackson finally spoke up, his voice rehearsed and hollow. "Mom, this is a time-sensitive opportunity. The technology market moves fast, and we need to capitalize now or risk losing our competitive advantage. Our potential investors need to see serious financial backing," Eliza added. "This farm is just sitting there when it could be funding a truly innovative company." "Just sitting there," I repeated, unable to hide my incredulity. "That farm feeds hundreds of people, provides habitat for wildlife, preserves soil health, and continues a legacy 4 generations in the making." "With all due respect," Cynthia interjected, "sentimentality doesn't pay bills. This offer won't last forever." I looked around the table at these 4 faces: my son, who couldn't meet my eyes, his wife, whose impatience showed through her polished veneer, and 2 professionals who saw my life's work as nothing but a transaction. The banker glanced at his watch, the broker tapped her manicured nails on the contract, and Eliza's smile grew increasingly strained. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner. It wasn't even a legitimate business meeting. It was an ambush designed to pressure me into an irreversible decision. I thought of Robert, of my parents, of my grandparents. What would they do in this situation? I smiled and said, "I need to use the restroom. Please excuse me for a moment." As I walked away from the table, I could feel their eyes on my back, probably assuming I needed a moment to compose myself before inevitably giving in to their pressure. They had no idea what I was actually thinking. The restaurant's restroom was mercifully empty. I splashed cool water on my face, trying to process the betrayal unfolding at the table behind me. How had things come to this? When had my son decided that my life's work was nothing more than an ATM for his ambitions? As I emerged from the restroom, I nearly collided with Marge Peterson, the restaurant's owner. I'd known Marge for decades. Our children had attended school together, and she occasionally purchased herbs from my farm for her kitchen. "Alberta!" she exclaimed, steadying me with a warm hand on my arm. "What a lovely surprise! Are you dining with us tonight?" One look at my face, and her expression changed from delight to concern. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. "I'm having dinner with Jackson and Eliza," I explained quietly. "And a banker and real estate broker I wasn't expecting." Understanding dawned in Marge's eyes. "Oh, Alberta, come to my office for a minute." She led me through a door marked private, into a small room with a desk and filing cabinets. "Sit down," she urged, closing the door behind us. "How much do you know about what Jackson and Eliza have been doing?" She asked, her direct manner a balm after the manipulation at the table. "They want me to sell the farm to fund their startup," I replied. "But tonight feels different, more orchestrated." Marge nodded grimly. "My son works at the county clerk's office. He mentioned seeing multiple permit inquiries for your address over the past few months, all filed by a development company called New Horizon Ventures." "I've never heard of them," I said, confused. "They specialize in luxury resort properties," Marge explained. "And according to Kevin Jackson and Eliza, have been meeting with their representatives at this very restaurant at least once a week for months." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. "Their technology startup might be partially real," Marge shrugged. "But from what I've gathered, they've been showing your property to developers without your knowledge, potentially promising what they don't own." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only were they pressuring me to sell against my wishes, but they'd been actively marketing my property behind my back. "Have they brought the developer tonight?" I asked, glancing toward the door. "No, but that banker Alan Davis is deeply connected with New Horizon. His bank finances most of their projects." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. What should I do, Marge? Walk out, confront them? "My brother Jim is an attorney specializing in property law," Marge offered. "He actually lives 2 blocks away. Would you like me to call him?" 20 minutes later, I returned to the table with renewed clarity and determination. The 4 of them had been speaking in hushed tones, but fell silent as I approached. "Sorry for the delay," I said pleasantly, retaking my seat. "Now, where were we?" Clearly relieved by my seemingly amenable tone, the broker pushed the sales contract toward me again. "We were just discussing the terms of the sale. As I mentioned, the buyer is prepared to offer $4.5 million with a 30-day closing period." "That's very interesting," I replied, picking up the document. "I'd like to review all the paperwork carefully before making any decisions." Jackson and Eliza exchanged a quick glance of transparent relief. "Of course," the banker nodded. "But we would need a signed intent to proceed this evening to lock in the terms." "Before I consider that," I said, "I have a few questions. This buyer, who exactly are they, and what are their plans for the property?" A moment of awkward silence followed. "The buyer prefers to remain anonymous at this stage," Cynthia finally answered. "They're represented by an investment group. As for plans, they're considering various options, including continued agricultural use." A blatant lie. Continued agricultural use doesn't typically require extensive permit inquiries for commercial development, I observed casually. Jackson's head snapped up, his eyes widening. Eliza's smile froze in place. "I'm not sure what you mean," the banker said carefully. "I mean the multiple inquiries filed by New Horizon Ventures regarding zoning changes and commercial development permits for my property," I clarified. "Permits requested without the property owner's knowledge or consent." The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly, from predatory confidence to defensive concern. "There may have been some preliminary research done," the banker admitted reluctantly. "Standard practice to explore potential options." I turned to my son. Jackson is New Horizon Ventures, your actual partner in this, rather than the agricultural technology you claimed to be developing. Before he could answer, a deep voice spoke from behind me. Excuse me for interrupting. We all looked up to see a distinguished man in his early 60s standing beside our table. Jim Wilson, he introduced himself, nodding to me. I was having dinner across the room and spotted my favorite client. Thought I'd stop by to say hello. The broker and banker straightened imperceptibly at the word attorney, which Jim had not actually said, but somehow conveyed through his demeanor alone. How lovely to see you, Jim, I responded warmly. We were just discussing some property matters. Anything I can help with? He asked innocently. Property law is my specialty, after all. Eliza's composure visibly cracked. This is a private family discussion, she said sharply. Of course, Jim nodded, not moving an inch. Though, in my experience, major financial transactions benefit from proper legal review. I gathered the documents from the table. Actually, Jim, I was just saying that I'd need my attorney to review these materials before proceeding. Would you have time tomorrow to look these over with me? Absolutely, he agreed. My morning is wide open. The banker and broker exchanged glances, their professional instincts clearly signaling retreat in the face of legal scrutiny. Perhaps we should reconvene after Mrs. Miller has had proper time to review everything with her counsel, the banker suggested, suddenly, far less pressuring than he'd been minutes earlier. That would be best. I agreed pleasantly. I'll take these documents with me for thorough review. As the professionals gathered their belongings and made awkward goodbyes, I turned to Jackson and Eliza. I'm disappointed, I said simply. Not in your desire to build a business, but in your methods. We'll discuss this further when honesty returns to the conversation. Jackson finally met my eyes, a mixture of shame and frustration in his expression. Mom, you don't understand the opportunity we're trying to capitalize on. I understand more than you think, I replied, standing to leave, including the difference between building something meaningful and selling something valuable that you didn't create. As I walked out with Jim beside me, I heard Eliza hissing at Jackson behind us. I told you, we should have brought the contracts directly to the farm. This public approach was your idea. Outside in the cool evening air, I felt a curious mixture of heartbreak and relief. The trap had been set, but somehow I'd managed to walk through it without being caught. Thank you, I said to Jim as we stood under the restaurant's awning. Marge said you'd be willing to help, but I didn't expect such perfect timing. Small towns have their advantages. He smiled. Now, how about we meet tomorrow morning to discuss what's really going on and how to protect your farm properly? I nodded, grateful for the unexpected ally, but grieving the trust that had been broken. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights, much like the tears I finally allowed to fall on the long drive home. The next morning, I met Jim Wilson at his downtown office, bringing the documents from the dinner ambush and additional papers related to the farm's ownership. His office was unpretentious but professional, with large windows overlooking Bozeman's historic Main Street. I've reviewed what you brought, Jim said after we'd settled in with coffee, and I have concerns about several aspects of these proposals. He walked me through the documents, pointing out predatory terms, hidden in legal language, and undervalued property, assessment, and financing arrangements that would have given Jackson and Eliza immediate access to a significant portion of the proceeds. Based on current market values and your water rights alone, your property is worth closer to $6 million, possibly more. Jim explained. They've deliberately undervalued it to make the quick sale more attractive to the developer. What about their startup? Is that completely fabricated? I asked. Not entirely, Jim replied. They've filed the proper business formation documents for an agricultural technology company called Farm Forward. However, my contacts in the investment community say they've been rejected by multiple legitimate funding sources due to a vague business plan and lack of proprietary technology. Over the next few days, Jim helped me piece together the full picture through his network of contacts. Jackson and Eliza had accumulated significant personal debt beyond their startup costs. Their credit card statements, which Jim obtained through legal discovery processes, revealed luxury car leases, an expensive apartment, high-end shopping habits, and lavish travel. They've been living like they've already made it, Jim observed. Classic case of spending tomorrow's dreams on today's credit card. Further investigation revealed they had already spent most of their initial investor money, not primarily on technology development, but on their lifestyle and elaborate marketing materials. One investor had already threatened legal action for misrepresentation. Most disturbing of all, they had apparently been representing themselves to potential investors as having secured rights to the farm property, showing conceptual drawings of an agricultural technology showcase that would eventually transform into a luxury resort and residential development. This explains their urgency, Jim noted. They've made promises they can't keep without your signature. The weight of these revelations was almost too much to bear. This wasn't just about Jackson wanting funds for a legitimate business. This was systematic deception, involving misrepresentation of ownership and intentions. I decided to confront Jackson directly, but away from Eliza's influence. I drove to their apartment the following day, timing my visit when I knew she would be at a regular yoga class she'd mentioned in previous conversations. Their apartment complex was one of Bozeman's newest and most exclusive, with mountain views and amenities like a concierge and private rooftop lounge. The monthly rent alone would have paid for a year of the farm's operating expenses. Jackson answered the door in expensive loungewear, surprise evident on his face. "Mom, what are you doing here? We need to talk," I said simply, walking past him into the apartment. The interior confirmed what the credit card statements had suggested. Designer furniture, the latest electronics artwork that even my untrained eye could tell was valuable. Not the home of struggling entrepreneurs, but of people living well beyond their means. "Is Eliza here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No, she's at yoga until 11, he replied, glancing nervously at his watch. "Good. Then we can speak honestly." I sat down on their pristine white sofa. "I know about New Horizon Ventures, Jackson. I know about the resort development plans. I know about the misrepresentations to investors." His face paled, but he quickly shifted to defense. "It's a legitimate business opportunity, Mom. The farm is just sitting there, while we could turn it into millions." "The farm is not just sitting there," I countered. "It's producing food, preserving ecosystems, continuing our family legacy. And it's not yours to sell or develop. It will be eventually." He argued an ugly entitlement in his tone that broke my heart. "I'm your only heir. Being an heir doesn't mean you're entitled to liquidate family legacy for quick profit," I said quietly. "What happened to you, Jackson? Your father and I never raised you to value money over everything else." For a moment, his facade cracked, and I glimpsed the son I remembered. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he admitted, sinking into a chair across from me. "The startup was real initially, but we kept getting rejected by investors, and the bills kept coming. And Eliza kept spending. I finished for him. He didn't deny it. She's used to a certain lifestyle. Her family had money once, though most of it was gone by the time we met. She can't imagine living any other way. So you decided my farm was the answer. New Horizon approached us after seeing our business plan, he explained. They suggested the joint venture. The technology aspect would be a small part, but the real money would come from developing the property into a resort. They have the capital and connections to make it happen, but they need the land. My land, I emphasized, which you don't own. Mom tried to understand. That property is worth millions just sitting there. Do you know what we could build with that kind of capital? The farm had its time, but the world has changed. And what about the promises we made to those who came before us? What about sustainability for those who come after? That's old world thinking, he dismissed. Modern success means adaptation, leveraging assets, maximizing return. I stood up suddenly, tired of the conversation. Jackson, I came here hoping to understand, hoping to find some way to reconcile. But I can see now that we value fundamentally different things. So that's it, he challenged. You're going to let your sentimentality destroy my chance at success. No, I replied calmly. I'm going to protect what matters from someone who no longer recognizes its true value. I suggest you find a legitimate way to build your business and a healthier relationship with money. Neither of those things will come from selling my farm. As I reached the door, he called after me, "This isn't over, Mom. That land will be developed eventually, with or without your cooperation." I turned back one last time. No, Jackson, it won't be. I'm making sure of that. The drive home was painful, but clarifying. I now understood the full extent of what I was dealing with and knew exactly what needed to be done to protect the land that had sheltered and nourished our family for generations. Over the next week, I worked with Jim to implement a comprehensive strategy to protect the farm from any future development attempts. We researched options ranging from traditional wills to various trust structures, looking for the most secure approach. A conservation easement through a land trust is your best protection, Jim advised after considering all angles. It permanently restricts development while allowing continued agricultural use, even as ownership changes hands. We contacted the Montana Land Reliance, a respected organization that specializes in preserving agricultural lands and open spaces. Their representative walked the property with me, documenting its ecological value and historical significance. This is exactly the kind of land we aim to protect, the representative assured me. Multi-generational family farms with healthy ecosystems and sustainable practices are becoming increasingly rare. The easement would allow continued farming, but permanently prohibit subdivision commercial development and any activities detrimental to the land's agricultural character or ecological health. The farm could still be sold or transferred, but the conservation restrictions would remain with the land, forever binding all future owners. There were financial benefits too, significant tax deductions for the donated development rights and reduced property taxes going forward. But my primary motivation was ensuring the land would remain as my ancestors had intended, a working farm, producing food and stewarding the land for generations to come. While these legal protections were being established, I decided to give Jackson and Eliza one final opportunity to choose a better path. I invited them to the farmhouse for a conversation, making it clear that I was willing to discuss legitimate partnership opportunities if they were prepared to be honest. They arrived with renewed confidence, clearly believing I had reconsidered their proposals after our confrontation. I had arranged the meeting in the farm's kitchen, where generations of my family had gathered for important discussions. "I'm glad you've had time to think things over," Eliza began, as she sat at the table, her designer handbag placed carefully on an empty chair. "I have," I agreed, "and I've made some decisions I want to share with you." I noticed a small recording device, partially hidden beneath Jackson's phone, on the table, likely placed to document any verbal agreements I might make. I made no mention of it, having already decided that complete transparency on my part was the best approach. "Before we start," I said calmly, "I want to be clear that I know everything. I know about New Horizon Ventures. I know about the luxury resort plans. I know about the misrepresentations to investors. I even know about the financial troubles you're both facing due to overspending." Their expressions confirmed every word. "That's why I've invited you here today," I continued. "Not to be accused or manipulated further, but to offer you one legitimate alternative." I slid a folder across the table. "These are preliminary plans for agricultural technology testing sites on 5 acres of the farm. If you're genuinely interested in developing farming innovations, I'm willing to provide land expertise and connections to legitimate agricultural research partners." Jackson opened the folder, scanning the contents with apparent interest. "The condition is simple, honest business practices and respect for the farm's integrity. The technology must serve agriculture, not replace it, and the land remains protected as a farm, not future development opportunity." "That's your counteroffer?" Eliza asked incredulously. 5 acres when we could be developing 300? "You couldn't be developing anything," I corrected her. "It's not your land to develop." "Yet," she said pointedly, glancing at Jackson. I had expected this response, but had hoped for better. "I should also inform you that as of yesterday, the entire property has been placed in a conservation trust with permanent easements prohibiting any future development, subdivision, or non-agricultural commercial use." The shock on their faces was immediate and complete. "You can't do that," Eliza exclaimed, her composure finally shattering. "I already have," I replied evenly. "The paperwork is filed and finalized. The land can never be developed for resorts, housing subdivisions, or commercial complexes. Not now. Not after I'm gone. Not ever." Jackson seemed to struggle to comprehend what this meant. "You've locked away millions in potential value," he said finally. "No," I corrected him. "I've preserved what's truly valuable. The farm can still be productive, profitable, and passed down through generations. It simply can't be paved over for quick profit." Eliza stood abruptly, grabbing her handbag. "This is insane. You've ruined everything." "I've protected everything that matters," I countered, remaining seated. "The offer to partner on legitimate agricultural technology still stands. That could be a valuable business with real impact. A pittance compared to what could have been," she spat. "Jackson, we're leaving. There's nothing for us here." Jackson hesitated, looking from his wife to me, and for a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. But then Eliza grabbed his arm, and whatever moment of clarity he might have had passed. "You'll regret this," she threatened as they headed for the door. "We'll challenge the easement. There are legal ways around everything." "Actually, there aren't," I replied calmly. "But you're welcome to waste more money trying." Jackson paused at the threshold, looking back at the kitchen where he'd grown up. "This isn't over," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. You're right. I agreed. There's always a path back to what matters, Jackson. When you're ready to find it, I'll be here. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the quiet house. I sat alone at the kitchen table, running my fingers over its worn surface, polished by generations of family meals and conversations. The pain of their rejection was acute, but beneath it ran a current of peace. The land was safe now, protected for future generations who might value it as it deserved to be valued. Outside the window, spring wheat swayed in the afternoon breeze, the same gentle motion that had comforted my grandparents, my parents, and now me. The farm would continue its quiet, essential work, regardless of human drama that had briefly threatened its existence. I had lost something precious in my relationship with my son, but I had preserved something irreplaceable for generations yet to come. That night, I walked the boundaries of the farm as the sun set, whispering promises to those who had come before and those who would follow after that. This land would remain, as they had intended, cultivated, respected, and undivided. 6 months passed, bringing autumn's golden light to the farm. The conservation easement had been fully implemented, bringing unexpected benefits beyond the security of knowing the land was protected forever. The Montana Land Reliance connected me with sustainable agriculture grants that funded improvements to our irrigation systems. The tax benefits from the easement allowed me to hire 2 full-time assistants, local young people eager to learn traditional farming methods, blended with responsible, modern approaches. I partnered with Montana State University's Agricultural Department to establish research plots studying drought-resistant heritage grains. The small lavender field expanded into a teaching garden where local schools brought students to learn about pollinator habitat and natural pest management. Most satisfying of all was the new educational program we launched, hosting weekend workshops for aspiring farmers and gardeners. Sharing knowledge that had been passed down through my family brought a sense of continuity and purpose that helped heal the wound of Jackson's absence. Through it all, I heard nothing from Jackson or Eliza. Through community connections, I learned they had moved to Seattle after their Bozeman apartment lease wasn't renewed, likely due to financial difficulties. The agricultural technology company they'd founded was formally dissolved, its modest assets claimed by creditors. On a crisp October afternoon, I was in the century-old barn, organizing tools after the final harvest, when I heard a vehicle in the driveway. Through the open door, I saw a modest, used sedan I didn't recognize. Then Jackson stepped out alone. He looked different, thinner, and somehow less polished. His designer clothes had been replaced by a simple flannel shirt and jeans. He stood uncertainly in the yard, gazing at the farmhouse, as if seeing it for the first time. I stepped out of the barn, wiping my hands on my work apron. Jackson, he turned at my voice, relief and nervousness crossing his face. Mom, I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. You're always welcome here, I said simply. You're my son. We stood awkwardly for a moment before he gestured to a bag in the back seat. I brought apples from the farmer's market. Honeycrisp, your favorite. Such a small thing, but it brought tears to my eyes. He remembered something about him that had nothing to do with the farm's value. Over coffee at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd had our last confrontation, Jackson shared what had happened in the intervening months. Eliza left, he said, turning the mug in his hands. After the easement, after the business collapsed, after the investors started threatening legal action. She said I wasn't the man she thought she'd married. I listened, without interrupting, letting him find his way through the story. I was angry at first, at her, at you, at everyone except myself, he continued. But then, I had to start over with nothing. Found a job, coding for a small company, rented a room in a shared house. Started living within actual means for the first time in years. That couldn't have been easy, I acknowledged. It wasn't, he agreed. But it was clarifying. Without the constant pressure to appear successful, without Eliza's expectations, I started remembering what I actually valued, what Dad taught me, what you lived. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I was wrong, Mom, about everything. The farm, the development schemes, the way we treated you. I'm so sorry. The apology was simple, but sincere, without qualifications or excuses. What do you want now, Jackson? I asked gently. He took a deep breath. To learn, to reconnect, to understand what this place really means beyond its monetary value. I don't expect forgiveness immediately or trust. I know I have to earn those back. And the farm, I had to ask. The easement is permanent. The development plans you had can never happen. I know, he nodded. And I'm glad. What we wanted to do was wrong. This land deserves better than to be carved up for profit. We talked for hours as the autumn light faded outside the windows. Jackson asked about the sustainable agriculture programs, the university partnership, the educational workshops. He wanted to understand the farm as it was, not as what it could be converted into. As evening approached, I made a simple dinner and we continued our conversation. For the first time in years, Jackson asked about his father, about family stories, about the knowledge passed down through generations. Would you be willing to teach me? He asked finally. Really teach me about the farm, the way Grandpa taught you. I know I'm starting late, but I want to understand. The request was unexpected, but deeply welcome. Yes, I said. There's always time to learn what matters. Jackson stayed in the guest room that night, and in the morning, he joined me for chores, awkwardly at first. Then, with increasing confidence, as muscle memory from his childhood returned. Over the following weeks, he visited regularly, gradually spending more time at the farm than in his rented room in town. 3 months after his return, he asked if he could move into the farmhouse's attached apartment, the one my parents had lived in during their later years. I want to be here, he explained, to learn everything, to be part of this place again. With cautious optimism, I agreed, and we established clear boundaries and expectations. This wasn't about inheritance or control, but about reconnection and respect. The conservation easement turned out to be a blessing for both of us. Without the possibility of development hanging between us, Jackson could approach the farm on its own terms, appreciating its true value rather than its potential price tag. And I could welcome him back without fear that his return masked ulterior motives. Together, we expanded the educational programs, with Jackson adding a technology component that genuinely served agricultural needs rather than replacing farming knowledge. He developed simple, affordable software to help small farms track planting, harvesting, and crop rotation, making it available as open source rather than proprietary technology. There were difficult moments, old patterns that needed addressing, trust that needed rebuilding. But gradually, season by season, we found a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectation or obligation. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing that had been my favorite spot with Robert, Jackson asked about something that had clearly been on his mind. Do you ever regret the easement, knowing what could have been built here? I looked out over the fields, golden in the sunset light, and thought about all that had unfolded. Not for a single moment, I answered truthfully. Some things are worth more than money, Jackson. Some promises need to be kept, even when keeping them is difficult. He nodded slowly, understanding, in a way he couldn't have 6 months earlier. I think Dad would be proud, he said quietly, of what you protected, of what you're building now. Of both of us, I corrected him gently, for finding our way back to what matters. The farm continues its quiet, essential work, producing food, protecting ecosystems, connecting people to the land. The conservation easement ensures it will remain undivided and agricultural forever, regardless of who stewards it in the future. What I've learned through this journey is that protecting what we value sometimes means making difficult choices, setting boundaries, even with those we love most. True legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in wisdom, preserved, and promises kept. I'm Alberta Miller, 68 years old, and I nearly lost everything that mattered by almost trusting the wrong people, even when they were family. But I trusted my instincts instead, and found that standing firm in your values sometimes means saying no to those you love most, especially when doing so protects what truly matters. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect something important to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If you found value in my journey, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more true stories of standing up for what matters. Share this with someone who might be facing pressure to give up something precious for short-term gain. Thank you for listening, and remember, the courage to protect what you value is always within you, even when those closest to you don't understand its worth.